I want you to picture a boardroom in the year 2010.
Wow.
You're sitting at the head of the table at Blockbuster Video, and you know the numbers on the spreadsheet in front of you they look okay.
Right, you're still making some money.
Yeah, exactly. You're still pulling in decent revenue from late fees. People are still walking in on a Friday night to rent DVDs. But outside that room, the entire world is basically on fire.
Because Netflix is mailing discs right to people's doors.
Right, and streaming technology is already flickering on computer screens. The ground is completely shifting. So you're sitting there and you have a choice to make. Do you burn down your own profitable business model to adapt to this new reality, or do you just stick to the script that's worked for 20 years?
And we all know the answer to that question. They stuck to the script.
They did.
They focused on that short-term revenue,
Mm-hmm.
the late fees,
Mm-hmm.
right, while the whole platform just shifted underneath them. Yeah. And total extinction followed.
Total extinction. It's the classic business school tragedy. But the reason we're talking about it today isn't to just, bash Blockbuster. It's because the source material we're covering in this deep dive puts a pretty terrifying lens on the legal defense industry.
It really does.
It argues quite aggressively, actually, that defense firms and insurance carriers are currently running a Blockbuster strategy in a Netflix world.
It's a stark comparison, but
Yeah.
honestly, it's an accurate one. Our deep dive today is based on this concept called the end of passivity.
Right.
The whole premise is that for the last 2 decades, the standard playbook for defending liability claims, mitigate and eventually settle that playbook has become totally obsolete. And not just obsolete, but genuinely dangerous.
Dangerous in what sense, though? Because, settling usually feels like the safe play rate, right? You pay some money, you make the headache go away, you avoid the wild uncertainty of a jury trial. That feels like risk management, not danger.
And that is exactly the trap. In a normal environment, sure, settling is risk management. But what the source material highlights is that we are definitely no longer in a normal environment.
Not at all.
We're seeing this massive rise in organized systematic fraud rings. These aren't just isolated incidents of, someone slipping on a banana peel at the grocery store.
Right. These are sophisticated operations.
Exactly. They're business enterprises designed from the ground up to extract maximum value from insurance carriers. And if your defense strategy is passive, if you're just trying to manage costs and avoid headaches, you are essentially funding your own destruction.
So you're saying that by settling to avoid the immediate risk, you're actually feeding the very machine that creates the risk in the first place.
Precisely. You're proving to them that their fraud model works. If you pay them, they're going to come back.
They'll just keep doing it.
Yep. So our mission today is to essentially dismantle that passive mindset. We're going to look at why the wait-and-see approach is failing, and then we're going to walk through a case study that is just wild.
It really is wild.
It involves an 8-figure demand, a completely fake breakup witness tampering that honestly borders on the absurd, and a mundane grocery shopping trip that ended up saving millions of dollars.
It sounds like a movie script, but this is a real case out of Kings County. But before we get to the drama there, I want to stick on this end of passivity concept for just a second. The source mentions that business as usual is failing. Why now, though? What exactly has changed in the landscape?
Well, historically, there was this ingrained belief that if things got too bad out there, someone else would fix it.
Like the adults in the room would handle it.
Exactly. The old guard of the legal profession would step in, or regulators would start handing out prison sentences, or the government would just crack down on these fraud rings.
Right, like everyone's just waiting for the cavalry to arrive.
Waiting for the cavalry. Yeah, but the source makes it abundantly clear that the cavalry isn't coming. Despite some recent civil RICO actions, those are racketeering cases against fraud rings, the bad actors haven't slowed down at all.
They just factored into the cost of doing business.
That's exactly it. It's still business as usual for them. They've calculated the risk and decided it's still highly profitable to file these lawsuits. So for businesses, municipalities, or insurance carriers waiting for a regulatory fix just isn't a viable strategy anymore.
So if we can't wait for the regulators to do it, we basically have to do it ourselves.
In a manner of speaking, yes. The defense industry has to become the regulator. And that brings us perfectly to the case study that really serves as the model for this new aggressive approach. It's a case called Pedro Rosario v. East 19 Residence Corps.
Okay, let's set the board here for you guys listening. Every legal battle starts with the stakes. What was the plaintiff claiming, and why was the monetary demand so incredibly high?
The claim centered on a massive spinal injury. Specifically, the plaintiff alleged that a defect in the building caused an accident that required a 5-level cervical fusion.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking about fusing the spine from C2 all the way down to T1.
Let's pause on that for a second because for listeners who aren't deep in medical claims, C2 to T1 might just sound like coordinates on a map or something. But anatomically, we are talking about the entire neck, right?
You are. C2 is the axis vertebra. It's right at the top, just below the base of the skull. It's what allows your head to rotate. And T1 is the top of your thoracic spine, right where your neck essentially meets your upper back.
Okay.
So fusing 5 levels across that entire span in the center, that is a major reconstructive surgery. It severely limits your mobility. It creates a lifetime of potential complications. It's a completely life-altering procedure.
And in the world of personal injury litigation, severity of injury essentially equals severity of payout.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Surgery of this magnitude, especially when performed by a surgeon like Dr. Jason Galena, who appears quite frequently in these types of high-stakes litigation cases, that hardware anchors the damages. You aren't arguing about a $50,000 settlement for a sprained ankle anymore.
Right.
Once that hardware is permanently in the plaintiff's neck, the demand floor starts in the millions. In this specific case, the demand was in the 8 figures.
So we're talking tens of millions of dollars. That puts the defense counsel Ken Danielson of Cipriani and Werner in a really tough spot. Because if you lose this case in front of a jury, and that jury sees those x-rays of the fused spine, you are looking at a catastrophic verdict.
A nuclear verdict, yeah.
So the conventional wisdom, right, the blockbuster wisdom, would be to say, we can't risk it, let's just find a number and settle.
That is the pressure cooker right there. And that is exactly where the end of passivity begins. Danielson and his carriers, AmTrust and Great American Players, they looked at this claim and decided the math just didn't add up. They chose to fight.
And to fight, they needed to attack the liability itself. They had to prove the building wasn't actually at fault.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the first major conflict in this story, which is the tampering. To win on liability, who did the defense desperately need?
They needed the building superintendent. In New York, premise liability, the super is basically the gatekeeper. To win a case like this, the plaintiff usually has to prove what's called constructive notice.
Break that down for us. What exactly is constructive notice?
Basically, you have to prove that the building owner knew or should have known about the dangerous condition and did absolutely nothing to fix it.
Okay.
So if the super testifies and says, hey, I inspect those stairs every single day and I saw no defect whatsoever, it becomes incredibly hard for a plaintiff to prove the building was negligent.
So the super is essentially the kill shot for the defense. If he speaks and tells the truth, the plaintiff loses.
Correct. So knowing this, the plaintiff's counsel decided to completely bypass the rules. They reached out to the superintendent directly.
Which we should be very clear about is a massive ethical breach. You simply cannot contact an opposing party's employee who is already represented by counsel. It's effectively witness tampering.
It is.
But here's my question. Why take that risk? These are established law firms. Why would a lawyer risk their bar license just to talk to a building super?
That is the right question to ask. And the answer lies in that business model we were discussing earlier. If you view litigation purely as a volume business, you tend to get aggressive. You push the boundaries.
You test the fences.
Exactly. They likely assumed that even if they got caught, the penalty would just be a slap on the wrist. A sternly worded letter from a judge. And that's it.
And historically speaking, they'd usually be right about that, wouldn't they?
Unfortunately, yes. Defense teams often complain. The judge says, don't do it again, counsel, and everyone just moves on. But Danielson didn't move on. When the defense confronted them about this, the plaintiff's counsel claimed that the person from their office who made the contact, a guy named Subin Blueprint, was just a new employee.
Oh, wow.
They basically said, oops, he's new. He made a rookie mistake. He just didn't know the rules.
It was the intern defense. He didn't know any better.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, a passive defense team might have just accepted that apology. It sounds plausible, right? Law firms have high turnover. You file a grievance, you move on. But remember, the theme here is the end of passivity. Danielson's team didn't just accept it. They investigated Subin Blueprint.
And this is where we get into what the source calls granular discovery. What does that actually look like in practice? Because it can sound like a bit of a corporate buzzword.
It means doing the actual dirty work. It means absolutely not taking anything your opponent says at face value. Danielson's team didn't just do a quick search on LinkedIn. They dug deep into the firm's history. and they found out that Stephen Perez was definitely not new.
Not new at all.
No, he had worked for that exact plaintiff's firm in various capacities for over a decade.
Over a decade, so the new employee excuse was just a complete fabrication.
Oh, it gets even worse. Not only had he worked there for 10 years, but he had actually been a client of that very firm for his own slip-and-fall case years prior.
You have got to be kidding me.
So the idea that he was this clueless rookie who didn't understand how litigation works was demonstrably 100% false.
That is so bold. To literally lie to the court and to opposing counsel about something that is so easily checkable, it speaks to a crazy level of arrogance, doesn't it? Like they just fully expected that nobody was going to bother checking.
It speaks to the fact that they are entirely used to a passive opposition. And when they were finally caught in that lie, the defense they offered for the tampering was even more bizarre.
Oh, right. I remember reading this.
They argued, and I'm heavily paraphrasing the actual legal filing here, that the contact couldn't have been nefarious because Perez left a callback number.
Wait, run that by me again. What was the logic there?
Their argument was essentially, if we were really trying to tamper with the witness criminally, we wouldn't have been so stupid as to leave a phone number where you could trace it back to us. Therefore, because we were sloppy about it, we must be innocent.
That is some truly impressive mental gymnastics. We are too incompetent to be criminals, Your Honor.
It's a completely desperate argument. But it perfectly shows the mindset the defense is up against today. These firms are used to getting away with things simply because nobody ever checks the granular details.
But Danielson checked.
He checked.
Okay, so that's conflict number one. The super is compromised, or at least under severe pressure from the other side. But the plaintiff has a backup plan, right? Because if the super won't play ball and give them the notice they need, they have to find someone else to prove it.
Right. They need someone on the stand to say, yes, the building absolutely knew about the danger, so they called the plaintiff's girlfriend to testify.
But wait, a girlfriend is obviously a heavily biased witness. If I'm sitting on a jury and the plaintiff's girlfriend takes the stand, I'm immediately thinking, well, of course she's backing him up. She probably wants a cut of the payout, too. It's really hard to trust that kind of testimony.
Precisely, and they knew that. So to make her seem credible, to make her look like this disinterested neutral third party, they hatched a ruse. She took the stand and testified under oath that she and the plaintiff had actually broken up in December 2025.
Ah, the ex-girlfriend strategy. I don't even like the guy anymore, so you can totally trust me when I say he was severely hurt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It adds this powerful veneer of truth to her words. She testified very forcefully about the defect in the building, directly contradicting the superintendent. And if the jury believes her, the defense loses the case. And honestly, she was probably very convincing up there.
So she testifies on, let's say, a Tuesday. We are broken up. I have nothing to gain from this. What happens next?
This is the aha moment of the whole deep dive. This is the core actionable step that separates the winners from the losers in this new landscape. The defense didn't just cross-examine her and cross their fingers hoping the jury sensed she was lying. They deployed active surveillance immediately.
They put a tail on them.
The very next day, the day after she sat in front of a jury and swore they were broken up, Ken Danielson's investigator caught them on video.
And what exactly were they doing?
They were grocery shopping together, holding hands, looking very much like a happy, entirely non-broken up couple.
Grocery shopping, it's so incredibly mundane. You know, if you're going to commit perjury for an 8-figure lawsuit, maybe just order delivery for a few days. Or at least go to different stores.
Again, it goes right back to that arrogance we talked about. They assumed nobody was watching them. They assumed the defense would be strictly passive. They thought, who in the world is going to pay for active surveillance right in the middle of a trial?
So Danielson gets this video file. What does he do with it? Does he rush into the courtroom and yell objection like it's a scene from a legal drama?
He does something much more effective. He files a brief with the court, and he actually includes still frames from the video right in the document. So picture this, the legal brief is arguing about perjury, and right there printed on the page is a photo of the broken-up couple holding hands to the produce aisle.
That is such a decisive mic drop moment. But let me play devil's advocate for just a second here. Does holding hands really prove they are lying about the actual injury? I mean, maybe they are just really friendly exes. Does that grocery trip really kill the entire multi-million-dollar case?
It kills the case because it completely destroys their credibility. In law, there is a Latin maxim, falsus in omnibus. False in one thing, false in everything.
Right.
If you are willing to look a jury in the eye and lie about your relationship just to trick them, The jury is legally allowed to assume you are also lying about the accident and the notice.
It entirely poisons the well.
And the final result of the trial.
A full defense verdict, $0 awarded to the plaintiff.
Incredible. So let's unpack this victory. Why did Danielson actually win? It clearly wasn't just blind luck.
No, it wasn't luck at all. It was a deliberate strategy. The source material breaks it down into 3 critical factors.
Okay.
First is what we've been discussing, granular discovery. Sweating the smart stuff, digging into employment histories, checking the details. Second is unwavering carrier support.
And this is huge because hiring investigators on a dime isn't free.
Not at all. The insurance carriers, in this case, AmTrust and Great Americans, they really deserve credit here. It is almost always cheaper in the short term to just settle a case than to pay private investigators to follow people around grocery stores.
Right.
But these carriers fundamentally understood the long game. They supported those extra costs because they point-blank refused to compromise on a lawsuit they believed was bogus. They empowered their counsel to actually go the extra mile.
And that leads perfectly to the third factor, which is the refusal to settle.
Exactly, the concept that you simply cannot negotiate with fraud.
Mm-hmm.
If you pay them a little bit just to make them go away, you're feeding the beast. There was a really interesting point in the source material from a Judge Sherman over in Brooklyn. He had a really sharp insight on this exact dynamic.
Yes, Judge Sherman. He is a very well-regarded TTA judge. He noted that defendants can't have it both ways.
Right. He said, you can't scream to the court, this is fraud. This is a complete lie. And then in the exact same breath, turn around and try to negotiate a slightly lower settlement amount.
Right. It ruins your credibility.
It makes the defense look entirely insincere. It makes the fraud claim look like a cheap negotiating tactic rather than an actual moral stand.
It's like, imagine going to a restaurant and getting brutal food poisoning. It's a dangerous situation. You don't call the waiter over and say, hey, this food poisoned me, so I'd like a 20% discount on my dessert.
Exactly.
No, you refuse to pay the bill and you leave the restaurant.
That is a perfect analogy. If the claim is poison, you do not negotiate the price of the poison. If it's fraud, you don't pay. Period. Judge Sherman's point is that if you truly believe it's fraud, you have to try the case. You have to be willing to lose, and if you do lose, because maybe the judge blocked your surveillance evidence, you take the appeal.
You fight it all the way up.
You have to make the bad actors earn every single dollar, and ideally ensure they earn absolutely nothing.
It sounds so simple when we say it out loud, but it requires a massive cultural shift in the industry. It feels like for a really long time, the legal defense world has been operating on this sort of gentleman's agreement vibe.
And the source material actually addresses that directly. It calls that the little house on the prairie mindset.
Yes.
The naive idea that we are all just good neighbors trying to get along and resolve disputes amicably. But the reality of modern fraudulent litigation is not Little House on the Prairie. It is Goodfellas.
I absolutely love that comparison. And they use a specific scene from The Sopranos to really drive that point home, right?
They do. It's a fantastic scene between Tony Soprano and his uncle Junior. Junior's old school, right? He's lamenting how things have changed in their business, saying, the families used to work together. It was amicable.
And Tony just completely shuts him down.
Tony replies, yeah, I remember that picture of Albert Anastasia lying on the barbershop floor, all amicable.
Brutal. And for listeners who don't know their mob history, Albert Anastasia was a boss who got assassinated while getting a shave. He probably thought things were totally amicable right up until the second they weren't.
And that is the ultimate warning for the defense industry. If you walk into a case involving organized fraud, thinking you are in a collegial, friendly environment, you are going to end up on the barbershop floor.
You're going to get blindsided.
You cannot negotiate with bad faith. If you try to apply garden variety claims handling concepts to organized fraud, you will lose every time. The risk of losing at trial must be weighed against the much greater risk of funding future fraud.
That is the key equation right there. It's not just about mitigating the risk on this one specific case. It's about the next 100 cases that are coming down the pipe.
Exactly. Every single time you settle a fraudulent claim, you are effectively buying a ticket for the next one. Ken Danielson and his carriers just decided to stop buying tickets.
So let's bring this home. What does this mean for you listening right now, whether you are in insurance legal defense or just running a business?
It means passivity is dead. That is the headline you need to take away. You cannot be passive. You have to assume that what you were seeing might be a complete fabrication, and you have to be willing to spend the resources to prove it.
It means looking for the supposedly new employee who has actually been there for 10 years. It means checking if the ex-girlfriend is holding hands with the plaintiff at the grocery store.
And most importantly, it means having the courage to take a verdict. The defense in the Rosario case didn't know for a fact they would win. Juries are inherently unpredictable.
Always.
But they knew that settling was strategically the wrong move. They committed to the fight.
And they had the backing to actually do it.
Right.
That partnership between the lawyer and the client, the carrier, is so essential. You can't have a pit bull lawyer if the client just keeps pulling back on the leash.
Well said. You need total alignment.
Right.
The carrier has to say, we support the granular discovery, go find the truth. And the lawyer has to be willing to do the hard legwork, not just push paper around.
It's a real call to action. The source material ends with a pretty provocative thought that I want to leave you with. It says we can't wait for someone else to take out the trash.
That's the line. We have to pick it up ourselves piece by stinking piece.
Yeah.
It's not a glamorous job. It is quite literally dirty work. It's sifting through boring employment records and watching hours of surveillance videos. But if the industry doesn't do it, the trash is going to keep piling up.
And eventually, you're completely buried in it.
And your business becomes blockbuster, extinct.
So that is the question we are leaving you with today. Are you running a blockbuster strategy in a Netflix world? Are you just waiting for the old amicable days to come back, or are you ready to do the dirty work required to actually survive?
It's an uncomfortable question, but it's really the only one that matters right now.
Huge thanks to the source material for this eye-opening case study. It is a wild story, but man, does it teach a vital lesson.
Indeed it does. Evolution is necessary.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one. Stay curious and maybe watch who you go grocery shopping with.
Always good advice.